Welcome back, dear ritual researchers, for part two of the system and journey overview of week one. We're going to dive next into the thinkers of this map. So let's get started with the theorist, Leary, as he was called as well back in the day. Dr. Timothy Leary, born 1920, died 1960, 1996, was quite a brilliant psychologist back in the 50s. Was one of the first ones that actually did groundbreaking research in personality development. Before Leary, there was the notion that once our brain reaches adulthood, development of adulthood around the ages of 15 to 20, there's no further brain development, or brains just stayed the same. But Leary discovered the notion of neuroplasticity in the brain and started researching ways to create brain change to actually, create growth and development of personality in the brain. He was also one of the first ones that, as a researcher, psychologist, traveled to Maria Sabina, who was a Mexican healer in Oaxaca, working with mushrooms. And after his mushroom trip, he came to this conclusion that one mushroom trip showed him more about human psychology and human development than his whole career as a professional professor in psychological research. He was a Harvard professor and very well renowned, but started experimenting, was one of the first adopters as well of the experiments with LSD. Um, and because of his research, also some involvement with this CIA research, apparently, he started, well, not because of research, but he started doing research with his grad students as well, like giving them LSD and making a little bit of a study group. When Harvard found out about this, they seriously reprehended him, asked him to retract and distance himself from the experiments. He could stay longer. He was doing research with Rupert Alpert, who was later known as Baba Ramdas, also one of the luminary figures of the counterculture, introducing yoga and Hinduism, neo-Hinduism, to the West and to the hippie culture. And they both did not comply with Harvard's request because they were of the impression or the idea that these substances are very powerful for human evolution and that more people should actually experiment with them. Most of the researchers by the time, in the 50s and early 60s, they were concerned about the power of the substances and held the notion, a more elitist notion, that the substances should be only given to psychiatric researchers and only used in a very, very controlled setting, and guidance. But Timothy Leary was of the opinion, no, give it to the masses because that's where we take on consciousness evolution. So he became a counterculture luminary, and left us with, two very powerful lineages in psychonautic exploration: set and setting, which describes set, the mindset, and the different configuration of our mind and nervous system as we enter into psychedelic experiences, and the setting, so the surrounding that we can create and also curate to also enhance or influence the psychedelic experience. And the very famous quote, turn on, tune in, drop out. So turning on, activating circuit 5, sensually pressure and desire, tuning in to that what the nervous system can perceive outside of sensory experience, and then dropping out of the social constructs or the 3D world at large. Deep breath. Oh, one more note to Leary. If you're like a really theory geek, that would be the place to start reading about the 8th circuit brain model. The next thinker of this model, and also a popularizer of this model, was Robert Anton Wilson. Robert Anton Wilson collaborated with Leary actually in developing the model while he was in prison. Um, so there is reason to credit him also with the co-development of this model. He lived until 2007, and we could call him the semanticist because he took a more language-based approach of general semantics by Korzybski to this model. One of my favorite quotes from Robert Anton Wilson in this regard is, "We'll look at for the secret, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of the wise, supreme enlightenment, God, or whatever, and all the time it's carrying us about, it's the human nervous system itself." So the notion to get out of this quote is, in my sense, that all of the experiences we can't have while incarnated into body on exploring this beautiful planet Terra are brought to you by your central nervous system. Even the more religious, mystical, and wacky experiences, all brought to you by your nervous system. And another notion that we will be taking with us in the explorations is the notion of reality tunnels. This means, or this points at, that are different neurological configurations that the brain develops in our survival strategies as we're growing up and developing, make out unique filters through which we perceive reality. We never can perceive reality in its totality. That would be chaos and completely overwhelming. So our brain has created very specific and unique filters according to our own journey of development. And these filters make out our individual reality tunnels. And everybody got a different reality tunnel, baby. That's the way it is. Robert Anton Wilson popularized these teachings on the eighth circuit brain model in his book Prometheus Rising, and the whole shebang also in his more prolific books and fantasy narrations like the Illuminatus trilogy. So Prometheus Rising is the place to go if you want to explore in a very witty, curious, but also more approachable manner the eight circuit brain model. Still very brainy, but it contains a lot of exercises you can do as well to get a first-hand impression of the different circuits. Deep breath. Now, the next thinker is still alive, Antero Alli, born in 1502, we could call the Ritualist. He was kind of like a contemporary of Robert Anton Wilson. So his first book, Angel Tech, which was also working with the eight circuit brain models, came out about the same time as Prometheus Rising. So they were like co-developing approaches to work with the eight circuit brain model. To this point, I would like to say that since Leary was sneered at by academia, in the counterculture as well, because he was defamated as an informant, which apparently does not hold truth, but was more of a propaganda to discredit him. But also because he pissed off a lot of people in academia out of the counterculture conservative backlash of the Nixon era that led to prohibition of research and substances. His theory and his models and his thought were not taken on. So the spread of this model and this theory and this this very brilliant way of approaching our human experiences and nervous system kind of like just was popularized on the fringes of psychonautic culture and occulture. So Antero Alli comes also from the original Falcon Press, printing, publishing institution that publishes mostly occultist books. And Antero Alli brings in more a ritual approach. He's been exploring the eight circuit brain model for about 40 years now, also developing his own ritual approach to it, the paratheater experiments, to get an embodied notion of what it means of navigating the different circuits. And another turn he brings into this model, which is very interesting and for me also very important, is he says he has like an embodiment bias, one could say. Whereas Leary and Robert Anton Wilson were more like, we need to go higher with the states of consciousness, and researching, achieving, and being in the higher circuits of consciousness was the main aim of the game for them. Leary out of a situation of imprisonment and solitary confinement, where then escape through higher states experiences was the only way to take a step outside of the actually lived and embodied reality he was facing. And Robert Anton Wilson had this kind of like view on the robot or the animal for the lower circuits, and kind of looked down at it, making the higher states of consciousness of circuit 4 to 8 more the place where an awakened or conscious individual would be. But Antero Alli argues that to get higher, you need to put your feet both on the ground. So taking on circuit 1 to circuit 4 also as a very important part of their system, as our ego structures to navigate this world, or creation metrics and interaction metrics with this reality, led to an embodiment bias, and to saying the lower circuits are not less important than the higher circuits. Moreover, the more we integrate the lower circuits and gain conscious ownership over them, the more we can explore with ease in the higher circuit. So a strong and flexible ego is needed to manifest our innermost dreams into the external world at large. So that's a paradigm shift. Befriend your ego. Don't try to kill it or transcend it. You'll get better results. And the experiments in paratheater, I also invite you, they're written down in the quest book, the polarity rituals and the quest scrolls. So I invite you to explore with the ritual technology of paratheater. I'll be sharing more resources so you kind of get an idea of that, and especially the no form meditation as a crux for paratheater experimentations. Deep breath. So the typo here reads different approaches to exploring the circuits, while Leary was more focused on SMILE, which stands for Space Migration, Intelligence Increase, and Life Extension, as a focus of his research with the circuits. Robert Anton Wilson was more concerned with meta-programming, so how can we, through access to higher states of consciousness, achieve reprogramming of the lower circuits, and creating brain change, thus also creating more flexibility in our ability to switch the channel, change reality tunnels. Whereas Antero Alli was more concerned with the ritual embodiment of all the different parts of our nervous system, and my focus of research has been the question of balanced psychonautics. So how can we use this model to understand how to integrate experiences of altered states, and how to create more grounding in our systems for safer explorations? Deep breath. Now I want to introduce you to a couple of important terms we will be also looking into and exploring with when talking about the nervous system and the different circuits. This whole approach of meta-programming relies as well on the psychologist John Lilly, who thought as the human form of a very complex, very intelligent biocomputer. And as the soul or the operator, the conscious operator of this biocomputer, we can engage in meta-programming, so actually change the programmings of our nervous system, of our biocomputer. There's these three terms: imprinting, conditioning, learning, are three phases of development of our nervous system. So you can imagine that our nervous system is like a very chaotic array of different neural connections, different neural circuits. And as it develops in different stages, at the beginning, it receives an imprint. This is kind of like the structure of neuronal highways that will form shape of each circuit. Then the next phase is then the conditioning. On top of the imprint, through habit, we develop like different information highways in our nervous system where our brain will usually go to as survival strategies and as saving energy strategies. And then there's learning, which is how we take in new information and integrate it into our conditions and imprinted wirings of the nervous system. Now, learning, or the things we've learned, they're easier to change as well. Changing conditioned nervous system will take a little bit more of a hands-on approach in habit maintenance and changing habits, and imprinting. The basic imprints are very difficult to change, but it's not entirely impossible, especially with the use of altered states of consciousness, the use of agents as acids. We create windows of neuroplasticity where it is possible to create new imprints in our nervous system. But the caveat here is that while in the open state of window of neuroplasticity created through the altered state experiences, we can't change the imprint, we still need then, in the following days and weeks, change our habits so that we can create new conditioning as well that supports the new imprint we want to be running through on. If we mess this integration phase up with not supporting the new imprint with new habits, the brain will return even stronger on the previous conditioning and discard the imprint we're trying to give it. So this is to make you aware of the very important part of conditioning, conditioning, conditioning. Quote, Leary uses the term imprint vulnerability to refer to a profoundly malleable, speak neuroplastic, and dangerously open state of the psyche capable of being imprinted with new patterns and habits of behavior, thinking, and belief. Leary discovered that imprint vulnerability occurred during the peak of any strong dose of LSD, a brief time when a new pattern and programs could be introduced with highly therapeutic, life-changing results. And this window of profound, malleable, and dangerously open states of neuroplasticity is what we want to make use when we access the meta-programming circuit and when we cast spells upon ourselves as neurohacking magicians. Deep breath. And last but not least, I want to introduce you to the term or the process of intelligence increase. Now think of this as each neuron or each neuronal network as well. Each circuit represents a neuronal network if you want so. Each neuron receives a signal, transmits the signal, like absorbs the signal through its pathway, and then transmits the signal to another part of the brain or to another neural network. So this process of receiving, integrating, and transmission will also be part of our explorations for its circuits to understand how these neuronal networks absorb information, integrate it, and transmit it again. And so the process of intelligence increase has to do with these three steps of absorbing, integrating, transmitting. Quote from Robert Anton Wilson, intelligence is the capacity to receive, decode, and transmit information. Stupidity is the blockage of this process at any point. Bigotry, ideologies, etc., block the ability to receive. Robotic reality tunnels block the ability to decode or integrate new signals, and censorship blocks the transmission. So there's always different blockages that can interfere with this process of intelligence increase. Deep breath. That's it for our second part. See you later.